We've got a pretty awesome group of panelists with us here today. We have Craig Harper from J.B. Hunt, Ryan Laskey from Dana, and Carrie Shafer from Daimler Trucks North America. So thank you all for being with us here today. I think you all agree it's been a pretty wild year. We started off just with incredible enthusiasm. The economy was roaring along. There's a lot of excitement about new technologies, new products, new players in the industry. We're starting to see some of the first electric trucks hit the road. There's a lot of funding coming out here in 2020 and just a lot happening overall. It really felt like the stars were beginning to align. And then COVID happened. Obviously, the impacts of this have been significant and far-ranging. They've impacted every part of the economy and parts of the economy that we thought would never be laid up like it has. The transportation industry, though, has really seen some very dramatic impacts. There's been huge shifts in demand. There's been surges, there's been pullbacks. The consumer sector has been surging. The commercial sector, where we're delivering to schools or large event gatherings, has been really grinding to a halt in a lot of cases. Likewise, the refuse industry has been hit pretty hard on the commercial side, but then surging on the residential side. Our rideshare services sector, we've seen massive shifts to sort of the home delivery business versus moving people around. Of course, throughout all of this, all of our organizations have had to shift to remote work environments. We've had to address health and safety issues for the employees and a lot more, without a doubt. Of course, the goal here is to keep everyone safe, but maintain the productivity within the company, within the organizations, and keep things moving forward. I think one of the things for me that I really found pretty inspiring was the recognition that we saw for the drivers. The drivers are out on the front lines, putting themselves in a position of risk to help society continue to move forward. So it was nice to see that collectively the drivers were being recognized. I think it's also fair to say that the transportation industry has really risen to the occasion during this crisis of the last several months. And that kind of gets us to the panel here today. And we're going to talk about this great momentum that we had building up at the beginning of the year, and then this significant and massive shift that we've had. And we want to understand, what does this all mean? What's changed? What's been the real impacts? And where are we headed? We've got, as I mentioned, a great lineup of speakers from both the supplier side and the customer side. And we're looking forward to hearing from them about all these issues. So we're gonna get started. We want to ask everyone to do a quick self-intro. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your role within the organization, and I'd love to hear a little bit about any new hobbies or skills that you've picked up during your COVID quarantine. So tell us a little bit about that, if you would, as well. So first up, really pleased to have with us Carrie Shafer from Daimler Trucks North America. Carrie, thanks for being here. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you, and kudos to you and your team for quickly pivoting on creating this virtual event. I think that's excellent. It's something that we're all going to have to get used to and learn about in the future. So just as a quick introduction for everybody, my name's Carrie Shafer. I'm in charge of product marketing and strategy for Daimler Trucks North America. I'm based out of Portland, Oregon. I'm responsible for our product roadmap, product marketing, product strategies. I've been with the company over 20 years. I have a background in mechanical engineering, enjoy driving trucks, and really want to say thanks also, Erik, for mentioning how important drivers are to our industry. I think that was really obvious to everybody during the early days of the pandemic. I would say the hobby or the skill that I have enjoyed over the last 3 or 4 months is meeting my neighbors on daily, regular walks. I now can say I know all of my neighbors within at least a 1 mile radius. So that's me. Thanks for having me.
Fantastic. Thanks, Carrie. And that's nice to hear. It's been interesting how this has impacted us and been able to get to know each other a little bit as we've been forced to do so, but good stuff. Okay, so Craig Harper, Executive Vice President of Operations and the COO at J.B. Hunt. We've been trying to get Craig to come back to Expo for many years, but he's a busy guy and is involved in many things, and just it's never been able to work out. So we're thrilled to be able to have Craig with us here today in our ACT Virtual. So Craig, tell us a little bit about yourself and background and your role at J.B. Hunt.
Yeah, it's great to be here, Eric, even though it's virtual instead of in person. I've been with J.B. Hunt for 28 years, and I'm the Chief Operations Officer. I've got a little bit of a different background and path to get into trucking. I actually was a chemistry major that went through dental school, so yes, I am a dentist. And then I went into selling stocks and bonds, tax shelters, real estate, running a hazardous waste company. And then I came to J.B. Hunt again 28 years ago. It was actually my 7th company. It's been a great run being here, and look forward to several more years. One thing that I've learned during this COVID experience is spending quite a bit more time with the family, working remotely, and then also picking up different habits, such as I got a Peloton bike, and then we have these internal competitions inside the company as well as family members. So that's been something that's been a positive experience through all this.
Excellent. Thanks, Craig. Nothing better than a little self-improvement, that's for sure. Okay, and then we have Ryan Leske, the Senior VP of the Dana Commercial Vehicle Drive and Motion business. Ryan, thanks for being here. It's great to have you. And tell us a little bit about yourself, your role at Dana, and what you've picked up along the way here in the last 6 or so months.
Sure, thanks, Eric. Really, I appreciate the opportunity to be a part of this panel. Very excited for everything that ACT Expo does for the overall industry. My name is Ryan Laskey. I'm Dana's Senior Vice President of Commercial Vehicle Business Unit. I've been with Dana for 20 years. Started right out of college and worked my way through. The last 5 years has really been my introduction into the commercial vehicle side of the business. And it's really been, couldn't have been a better time just with the technological changes that have been happening over these last few years. It's really one of the most exciting times in the industry, in my opinion. So really excited. COVID has really opened up my eyes a little bit. Working from home opened up an opportunity for me to really start to get into increasing my barbecue skills. So, I went out and purchased a smoker at the beginning of the work at home, where I could actually get on conference calls at 6 in the morning, start to smoke the meat, and then let it smoke all day and just check on it occasionally in the middle of calls rather than being in my office. So I've really kind of polished up my skills on barbecue ribs and brisket in the time that we've been working remote. So.
Fantastic. Well, I think we'll grab Kary and her neighbors, and we'll head on over for some barbecue, and then we'll have to hop on Craig's Peloton to work it all off. So, excellent. Well, thanks for those introductions. Great to hear a little bit of background on yourselves and what you've been up to. Let's roll into some of the discussion here. Let's get right to the main focus and the theme of our discussion, which is the impact of COVID, this massive curveball that's been thrown and has impacted all of us personally and professionally, all of our businesses. And I want to hear from each of you about what has been the impact, really specifically in terms of your investments and commitment around advanced tech and sustainable transportation. I know everyone's been making big investments and big commitments. The world has changed quite dramatically, both from the health pandemic and the economic situation. But what has this meant internally within your companies in terms of your forward commitment on these sustainable tech issues? So Ryan, maybe we'll start with you. You were the last to be introduced. We'll put you on the spot and have you be the first to jump in here. Tell us what's going on at Dana.
Thanks, Eric. Obviously during these challenging times, there's a number of different things we've had to do at Dana. First off, the protection to our employees and making sure we have proper PPE and proper work from home policies in place. Everybody learning how to use all the right virtual tools in order to be working more effectively. So that's really been first and foremost. As we've gotten into that, obviously you get into trying to manage the down cycle of the market and how do we manage our costs as efficiently as possible. Throughout that entire activity, we have not backed off at all. on any of our sustainable mobility investments, both with our people, inorganically or organically. We've continued development activity. We've actually gotten very creative on development activity in continuing progressing our designs and our launched products throughout this cycle. We've had people doing makeshift wire harnesses on their kitchen table and doing design reviews, all remotely and walking phones around. So we've got to get really creative in how we've done this. We've also gone throughout the shutdown and the quarantine cycle. We've actually completed an acquisition of an electric vehicle integration company out of Europe and done that completely virtually, throughout this time period. So, we're not backing off at all. This change is coming, and we're not going to slow down.
Can only imagine the complications of doing an acquisition without being able to get out there in person to walk the facility, meet the people. Different times, I'm sure.
Definitely. Very creative at this time.
Craig, why don't we hear from you? What's been the impact at J.B. Hunt? I'm sure there's pros and cons, ups and downs. Tell us what's been the impact in sort of your efforts. I know you guys are always really aggressive, looking at more efficient technology, clean tech, and all the different fuels and things out on the horizon. But how have you handled this big COVID curveball?
Well, as you said, it was a big curveball. I go back to March, and we actually went to a work from home for people that could perform their work from home. But with 30,000 employees and 20,000 drivers and 1,500 mechanics and several hundred frontline workers, they couldn't work from home. So they were out there on the front line. And what's been amazing to watch is how these people all pulled together and worked hard so that we could to deliver on the promises that we had for our customers. And so obviously, first and foremost was being concerned about our worker safety. And so getting all the PPE out there and hand sanitizer and the education that what we did know about the virus. So kept the people out there working. And I was so proud to see our company and others step up and really keep America operating. It's easy to forget now, but there was a time when the roads were bare, the vehicles were, cars were all at home, people were staying home, and it was just the trucks continuing to deliver the goods. And more important than delivering even the food, the water, and the medicine was that they were delivering hope to America. And so I was so proud of the industry. And we were fortunate enough that even though there were some businesses that were shut down, we were able to move workers to the areas that were surging. So we didn't have any layoffs, and we were proud of that. Then as far as our investment, that's continued. We're investing a lot in our technology. Our mission is to create the most efficient transportation network in North America, and we plan on doing that with the investment in the technology we have to match carriers and customer loads and eliminate a lot of the waste, such as empty miles, and then also continuing to invest in the latest equipment with the best fuel efficiency, and then also with intermodal, continuing to invest in that part of our business because intermodal is 250% more efficient than over-the-road trucking. So the investment continues.
Good to hear. Good to hear. Full steam ahead. Kary, tell us what's been the impact at TTNA on all the especially electric technologies that you guys have been making such big announcements about, big investments in.
Sure. Yeah, well, just like Craig and Ryan talked about, we were impacted by the stay-at-home orders and shutdowns, but I'm really impressed by how quickly our leadership team rallied the troops, mobilized the workforce. We were able to cut costs and put measures in place for social distancing and PPEs, especially in our plants. We had daily huddle calls, regular communications with our entire employee base, and we engaged in regular daily communication with our dealers and customers. And we worked really closely with our suppliers to make sure that they were able to keep running, and we had very few disruptions in our supply chain as a result. And if you think about it, we are in a cyclical business anyway, and in many ways, we were ready for this. Not necessarily the health crisis, but the following financial impacts that we all feel, and that this is causing. We did have to let some contract workers go, which is unfortunate, and we did have to reduce our plant operations to a minimum for a short amount of time, but literally overnight we were able to adapt to a new way of working. And we talk about Zooms and virtual design reviews, all those things. But we really were focused on keeping our dealers and customers running and supporting the drivers who were essential for delivering freight during this time. I would say we've doubled down on our commitment and investments in product development and sustainable technology. We finished delivering all of our innovation trucks, our battery electric vehicles, to our customers right before COVID. And we supported those customers by putting them into their operations. And recently we surpassed 300,000 miles on those trucks. So over 300,000 miles we've amassed in the last few months, even during this time. And we were able to maintain our production schedule and maintain our schedule of builds and delivery for our CX fleet, which I think is really important. Those are in the process of being delivered right now. And for sure, we were impacted, but we managed through these past few months with minimal impacts to our program schedules. And I just think that's, again, a testament to our workforce and the engagement and the flexibility and the creativity of our employees. And our commitment to sustaining technology is unwavering. And our electric program is marching forward.
It's great to hear, Kary, and interesting. It is a cyclical business, as you mentioned. The truck volumes go up and they come down, and there's different reasons based upon model years and technology changeovers and all that sort of thing that has historically been the case in our industry. And so it's interesting perspective that actually has helped you to sort of pivot and roll with it, right? That's sort of the nature of the business. But the investments that you're making in the innovation fleet and CX and overall electrification, I mean, that really is a little bit of a separate part of the business, right? I mean, that's you're not commercially producing those yet. And so what we're hearing is that has maintained, as the others have mentioned, full steam ahead.
Absolutely.
Great. And I know some of the customers that are driving those trucks now in their businesses, as demand for trucking services has surged, I know that they were able to put some of those trucks to work to help meet that surge. Just frankly, they had no other trucks. And so even though this is a little bit of an early stage pilot, they said, put them out there on the front lines. And so that was cool to see. So I want to dig a little bit into this world of electrification. Ryan, you mentioned the acquisition that you guys just did. Dana is very involved in lots of electric drive, including fuel cell technology, but obviously battery electric as well. And there's a lot of synergies there. I wonder if you could just tell us a little bit about what Dana's perspective is on the market. You're working with a lot of different partners, a lot of different OEMs, but what gets you excited? What do you guys see as sort of near-term opportunity in the electric drive space?
I think if I look at near-term, there's a couple ways to look at it. Our primary focus, and as we started down the battery electric vehicle technology, is we focused around where we felt the customers, the end users, were going to see value first and foremost. So if I look at that, I look at where we started most of our investment and development was all centered around the bus space. And really that market's here now. If I look at China, I think 20% of the China bus market is already electrified. So the transit bus space, that crossed that threshold a while back. And right now, I mean, we have over 1 billion kilometers on our electric drive motors today. And most of them, probably 80% of them, sit in the Chinese market. And that's really where we started. And then our next focus was kind of in the medium duty space, the space that was going to be short range, a lot of stop starts, and are going to basically sit for, they're going to run maybe 2 shifts a day, sit overnight and charge. So that was really kind of our next foray into to the EV space is really into that medium duty, and that's really what's starting to see a lot of demand right now. And especially you start to see a surge from COVID and the business conditions change, and probably in all likelihood it's going to be a trend shift longer term. So it's not just a short range blip here. that people are buying more and more online. This is going to be a long-term change that we're going to see in the industry. And that's just going to make the demand for these in cities and in large metropolitan areas, the need for clean technologies in those spaces. So that's really where a lot of our focus has been. And some of it we see now, and some of it we see in the very short term, next couple of year cycle.
Interesting. Kary, I want to maybe ask you, when we look at the global level of activity, there's just a lot happening. Obviously, Daimler participates at the global level, has a lot of things happening in Europe, I know, around electrification as well. How have you been able to leverage those activities based upon what you're doing in the North American market? Is there synergy there, or is it sort of starting over here in North America just because things are so different, or how does that all work?
Yeah, good question. So we do leverage investments in technologies from around the world, and not only from our truck and bus division, but also from cars for product development and to accelerate commercialization. So it's an advantage. We leverage our own resources, but we have access to a tremendous global network of suppliers, and we can work with the car division to develop and source that base technology that's like battery cells and modules that give us huge volumes and scale. On the component and vehicle side, that base technology development is absolutely shared between the regions, and it translates in both directions. We share technologies with our counterparts in Europe and in Asia, and they share it back here with us. But just as with our other, traditional powertrain platforms, safety systems, we have to tailor those developments to our local market and to our regions and customer applications. So as you know, the use cases, distances traveled, infrastructure, vehicle weights, all those things have to be considered during development. So a big pro is absolutely being able to leverage those global resources and scaling them for regional applications. And scale brings quality, reliability, lower cost, and manufacturability. And we can work faster in three regions. We can test faster, and we can bring product to market with high maturity if we're able to do that. And you can imagine that base technology does require a lot of upfront definition of the product requirements, but once those are rolled into a spec and a development plan, the work can happen quickly. So, we don't want to just win the first race. We want to take the long view, and we want to win the championship. So we want to win that by bringing mature, reliable products to the market that help our customers be successful and meet their business goals and their sustainability goals. So it's a real plus for us to be part of a global network like that.
Interesting. I'll have some follow-ups, but I want to get Craig's perspective here. Craig, you guys are North American based and don't operate around the world, but we see Ryan, you mentioned 20% of the bus market in China is EV, and both of you are participating globally around electric vehicle development and technology development. Craig, you mentioned earlier you guys are big on efficiency, intermodal. I'm sure that comes with a slew of technology choices and innovation that's happening around IoT, connected technology, and lots and lots more. So given all of this, given global developments around powertrain, drivetrain, electric drive technology, plus all the connected tech stuff that you guys have to pay attention to, and the advancements in diesel, how does a company like J.B. Hunt, or put yourself as a proxy for fleets across America, how do you keep up with all this and figure out where to invest time, energy, and resources to dive deep and test and try? And how do you keep track of it all?
Well, we're fortunate to have some great OEMs. And so we lean heavily on those OEMs and their suppliers. We'll work with them and test different things, but we do get a lot of calls. You wouldn't believe all the gadgets, the widgets, the devices that we get asked to test. And our basic line is go present it to the OEM, convince the OEM that that's a good product for them to put on their piece of equipment and bring that to us to test. And then we'll work with OEMs and test those different devices. You know, if everything delivered exactly what it was promised when it first showed up, we would be getting 12 miles per gallon, and we'd be birthing drivers, because it seems like everything that comes around here is supposed to improve your MPG and cut down on driver turnover and attract more drivers. So again, we rely on the OEMs, and then also on our own development, such as what we've done with JB Hunt 360 platform, developing that in-house. Then also, if you go back in time, actually developing the container back in 1989 and continuing to make improvements there.
Excellent. So partnerships are key.
Yes.
I want to go back, Kary and Ryan, a little bit to the global discussion we were just having. And, you know, Ryan, you mentioned you did an acquisition without really being able to do all the traditional things. I'm sure, you know, fly and meet with people. Kary, you mentioned leveraging all the activity in Europe, and I know prior to COVID, a lot of the engineering team was flying from Portland over to Germany and around the world, and, you know, meeting face to face and putting hands on technology. I'm sure that's all changed. Do you see some of the ways and strategies that you've developed to deal with these issues as now more baseline in terms of how you operate in the future? Has that changed the way you fundamentally do business? Or for things like this, are we going to need to go back to in-person travel, all those sorts of things?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that this will definitely have an impact on us going forward, and it will have a long-term positive impact on the way that we do development. It's allowed us to refocus our priorities and refocus on our development processes, and having the tools like virtual meetings and a lot of the development platforms that are shared across each one of the regions has shown that we can be quick in development, quick in decision making, quick in doing design reviews. So I think there's a lot of positives that have come out of this, and this new way of working is it'll become part of our everyday, every week, every month development cycle, and part of our toolkit in the future.
Right. How about you?
Yeah, no, I think that's definitely true. There is going to be changes, and I think one of the things that I look at from this perspective is there's a lot of people who took advantage of, you know, technologies like this, especially some of the younger generation, right? The younger generation, this was, you know, just how they operate. You know, if I looked at my kids, that's all they do. They're on FaceTime all the time. This is normal for them. So I think it helped to kind of change the mindset, where, you know, you rewind 2 years ago, and actually if you rewind 6 months ago, people would tell you that people cannot work remotely, they cannot work from their house, it's just an inefficient process. But now I think people are starting to realize that, hey, you take away that 2 hours of commute time every day, and some of these other this wasted time in how you operate, and you can do it at a phone call. I think people are realizing the efficiencies here, and it's going to make a change in how we do things. It's not going to stop, you know, us from having to go out and see all of your employees and walk the floor and spend time with people and suppliers and customers and partners and have that partnership. There's still that partnership in this business, and that's going to be required to some extent, but there's going to be a much more efficient use of that going forward, because people have learned these tools and are getting more and more proficient with them.
And better tasting dinners too.
Definitely.
So efficiency, there's a lot of efficiency gains that have sort of been forced upon us, and that will stick around and help drive and accelerate, I would assume, innovation, technology advancement going forward. Craig, you mentioned, you know, the promise of 12 miles per gallon, which a few years ago I think would have been ludicrous to even say, and, you know, almost laughable, but we are seeing diesel trucks today getting 10 miles per gallon based upon the innovation and combinations of technology that have been put together. And it's been really incredible to see that. Obviously, that's not all trucks, and it's certain applications and use cases, but it's been pretty amazing. However, what we see is it also makes other technologies, such as natural gas or electric or fuel cell, that much more difficult to compete, right? Because the diesel bar has continued to go up, 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 and all these other fuels and technologies do have to compete against that baseline level of efficiency. So tell us, what is J.B. Hunt seeing in terms of the current diesel environment, and how do you then measure up these new and innovative technologies against that? Does it make it more difficult?
And absolutely, it does make it more difficult. You hit the nail right on the head. It's a high bar for the alternative vehicles to get over right now with the improvements that the OEMs have made in the MPG, and then also the clean burning technology. We saw it back, Erik, in 2008 when diesel ran up to $4.74 a gallon, and we were getting all these calls on natural gas. And then the next year you see diesel drop down to $2 a gallon. So the calls quit. So there's a lot of efficiency in burning diesel. It's a dense fuel, so a high bar to get over. And that's why you get into all this, and we got to talk about incentives and just how are we all going to make this make sense. Because right now, if you call and you want to get a quote, on an electric vehicle, you're talking numbers like 3 to 4 times the price of diesel. So obviously we can't make that work. And part of being sustainable is having a sustainable piece of equipment to operate, but it's also remaining in business. You can have all the great intentions and all the great ideas, but if you can't stay in business, then you can't bring it to fruition. But what's exciting is what you're seeing with the improvements. And we're excited about the improvements that we are seeing in batteries, and then also behind that, I believe, the fuel cell technology. So it's got a ways to go. You've got to get that total cost of ownership at least at parity, and give us a chance to be able to operate that equipment and operate it where we can be economically sustainable.
It's a great point, Craig. I know we spend a lot of time here working with customers to meet those sustainability goals, and we always talk about it has to be in that order. It has to be economically sustainable before it can be any other kind of sustainable, which is, in this case, environmentally. And I don't think that that's a foreign concept to anyone, on this panel here, right? I mean, you're all major global players. Craig, we were talking earlier about the wonderful performance of the J.B. Hunt stock has been looking great. So obviously, you guys are focused on the economic sustainability, as is everyone here, right? But I want to ask Ryan and Kary, you're spending massive amounts of money on developing electric drive technologies and other new technologies, not just electric. But we're obviously not at the point where we're seeing sales of those vehicles in the volumes that you need to sustain that kind of investment. And so I want to ask, how are you navigating sort of this brave new world of advanced tech and new powertrains and new fuels, and ensuring at the same time as you make these big investments and acquisitions that you're meeting these economic sustainability goals while pursuing the environmental piece? How does that work?
I can try to take a stab at it to start with. Dana's a 115-year-old company. We've been supporting a number of different technologies, whether it's natural gas or whether it's diesels or different, the evolution of diesels throughout the years. So we've always kind of been a power agnostic supplier. We don't care what our products are behind. You generate the power and we'll get it to the wheel for you. That's kind of where our business model has always been. And as we've kind of laid out the strategy in electrification, we've done kind of a similar type of thinking there. That whether we're going to end up in fuel cells or whether we're going to end up in hybrid technology, or pure battery electric vehicle, we're investing in companies and investing in technology that can be supportive within that. So we definitely have to have a balance, and we work to do that, to have a balance in our technology offering, because we know that the market's not going to transition like a light switch. There's going to be trials, and as Craig said and Kary said, really, you're going to have to kind of you have to show the benefit. You have to show that there's value in these technologies and they're reliable. No one's going to buy it on a PowerPoint slide and all of a sudden just change over their entire fleets. That's not how this industry works. This industry works with time, and you need to have partners who can withstand a reliable development process and work through this over a number of years and build that confidence and continue to advance the technology and get the cost down to where you start to see it where the customers are demanding it. Not, you don't have to beg. Craig doesn't have to beg people to take the phone call to try this technology. Craig is knocking on Kary's door constantly of, hey, I need these trucks, I need them now because it's the best way for me to operate my fleet. So I don't know, Kary, your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I mean, very similar to yours. And I would say, Erik, Craig, Ryan, I mean, I think economic sustainability and environmental sustainability really need to go hand in hand. And I think many companies, most successful companies have to manage that on an ongoing basis. I think it's really important. And many, including our companies, have been doing that for years. And it's an ongoing challenge to balance core and traditional products with investment in new technology. And like Ryan said, we're going to continue to have a mix of propulsion systems in our world for quite some time. It will take time, and we have already achieved huge reductions in greenhouse gas thanks to improvements in our conventional powertrains and commitments to sustainable technology. So I would say it's not an either or, it's both. Economic and sustainability, environmental sustainability have to go hand in hand.
One of the things that we spend a lot of time working on is bringing incentives to these projects to help with some of the early R&D, to help with early stage deployments where the new technologies and fuels are inevitably more expensive than the baseline. Maybe they can't quite compete as well on the efficiency pieces, et cetera. So I was wondering, the group's perspective here on the role of incentives, which I think is a little bit of a rhetorical question, but as we think about someone mentioned earlier, I think Kary mentioned the long game here, right? Ultimately, we do have to reach scale and economies of scale for this to be truly sustainable, and it's probably at the scales that you all talk in are not something that can be supported, even with the relatively robust amount of grants and incentives that are out there in the world. So can you comment a little bit about your perspective on near-term grants, incentives, and then transition to the longer-term scale? How do we get there? I don't know who wants to take a shot at that one first.
I'll go first. Yeah, I touched on it earlier. I think incentives are extremely important with a new technology. You've got to get some of the equipment out there where we can test it so we can prove to ourselves and to others that it's a viable technology, that it's one that's going to be reliable. Show it off to our customers. We'll put any piece of equipment that a customer wants us to put in, as long as they'll sign a long-term contract, showing that they'll pay for that piece of equipment. So if we can have some incentives to get our feet wet, show people how the technology works, and you'll get some entrepreneurs that are going to step up. And if they have hope that this technology is going to work and play out, then they'll continue to invest in it. And you give those folks some money, let us prove that it works, and then they'll find a way to commercialize it and get it out to the masses. And as far as how long they should last, it really depends on what you see going on and the progress that's being made, and also what problem are we trying to lessen or eradicate. And if it's a major problem, then we may need the incentives to go on a little longer and let the technology to play out. And I think there's great examples of where incentives have worked very well. So I think they're a very important part.
So does anybody else want to jump in on that?
I'll kind of hit on a couple of key things here. I think really as the advanced technology is coming out, the incentives really act as something to help to supplement R&D expense and really the expense into the technology of this new era. And really, I think the one area that I look at that's had the biggest impact is if you look at the battery costs. And if you don't have the incentives, you wouldn't see the battery progress that you've seen over the last number of years. Just from memory, I think it's probably pretty close to this. Over the last 5 years, there's been a 12% year-over-year cost reduction in batteries. And if we don't have incentives that help to fund that, I really question if you would have seen that much investment by the large battery companies to make that change. So that's really, I think, what drives the incentives to really help us to get these technologies on the road, especially in these early days.
So this may be a little bit of a hot potato question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. There's different theories on how we get to economies of scale, right? And it's the scale issue again, and that is in part, Ryan, I think what's driving the cost reductions in battery tech. It's not the only thing, but that certainly helps when you can produce lots of one thing, as I'm sure everyone on this call knows. And there's sort of two, or maybe more than two, but I'll ask about two. One way to do that is just regulate, right? And we see a lot of that these days where there's regulations saying this shall be the path because we want to drive investment and force us to get to economies of scale. The other way to do it, we talked a little bit about this earlier with the diesel bar that's being set at 10 miles per gallon, is just marketplace competition. Right? That works miracles in terms of improving products and technology and service and getting to scale. If something works better, you'll sell a lot of it and off you go. So any perspectives on what we're seeing in the current environment with regulatory approaches versus more market-based competitive forces in play? Anyone want to tackle that one?
I'll give it a shot, and that just real short. I think that incentives are critical to reach scale, and I think I don't know what you guys think, but regulations without incentives means someone is paying. Someone ends up having to pay until, like you said, you can reach scale and some critical mass in the technology. So I think incentives are for the vehicle, and don't forget the charging infrastructure, right? So we need both. Incentives will continue to be an essential driver of adoption for many years to come, and I really think it's the only realistic way to achieve that scale and drive down capital costs and drive down costs for our customers. Because without those incentives, these technologies are expensive and they're going to be out of reach for many of our fleets for many years. So again, until we start to see a critical mass of vehicles on the road, and the public infrastructure rise up to meet that demand and costs go down, we'll need to have incentives, and they'll continue to be important.
So following on, Craig, you had mentioned in your response the incentives around natural gas. And all of you on this call, I think, are invested in one way or another in sort of natural gas platforms, and now increasingly zero emission platforms, whether they be battery or fuel cell electric. Are there any lessons learned that you've seen from your experiences with natural gas or other technologies or fuels that you're applying into this new zero emission investment pathway that you're headed down?
Yeah, I just think with any new technology, we need to have multiple OEMs. We need to be able to test the product, and it needs to be, that total cost of ownership again needs to come in line, and areas of like weight and range and reliability, the uptime, the charging or the refueling infrastructure. So we need to see all that come about, and we didn't see that all unfold the way that we thought we would back when you started seeing those prices, so high diesel prices and so low natural gas prices. But we're excited about seeing that on the electrics, and I think we'll see that continue down that path.
One of the things that sort of comparing and contrasting the natural gas and the electric is, and Kary, you mentioned the infrastructure, right? The infrastructure is really critical. I think in the natural gas industry, you have 20-ish years of experience and refinement of the business models. we see that the infrastructure hurdle there has been lessened significantly, that with a modest deployment of trucks, you're able to attract the third-party capital to come in and provide the infrastructure, and off you go with the projects. In the battery electric world and the hydrogen fuel cell world, for that matter, there's still a lot of questions about what that future infrastructure looks like for high volume commercial fleet fueling. But the one thing I think that we do know, there's a lot we don't know, but we do know that it's expensive. That this infrastructure does seem to cost quite a bit of money, and that will be a hurdle for the market to overcome, for us to accelerate the market and to get ultimately to scale. And so, as truck builders, sellers, and buyers here, how do you deal with this infrastructure issue as you go through the decision-making process to think about commercialization and scale? Do you have any thoughts about how do we tackle these hurdles and how this will all sort of play out in the future as we work towards that future goal?
Yeah, so I'll take that one. So I think that having infrastructure in place for battery electric or hydrogen is critical, obviously. And I think with natural gas, one of the lessons learned is that you have to look at the whole ecosystem. You can't just bring a truck to the market without that ecosystem wrapped around it. And for battery electric or hydrogen, that includes, consulting services. It includes understanding the infrastructure needs, charging needs. So I would say OEMs cannot be a bystander in this process. We can't wait and watch. OEMs have to be active, and they must pull together customers, utilities, and government organizations to tackle these challenges and do it from every angle at once. We need low carbon fuel credits and similar programs to incentivize development of public charging depots. We need to partner with the utilities. It has to be a push instead of a pull to get there.
Any other thoughts on the infrastructure question? Craig, have you guys started to look at infrastructure for charging, depots of trucks, and what have you found so far?
Yeah, well, I'm happy to say that we will be delivering our first electric load next week on the eCascadia out in California. So we've had a little bit of experience with some of the infrastructure there, albeit on a small scale. But yeah, it's Kary hit on it. We've got to see this whole system come together. You didn't see it that way with natural gas. When it kicked off, we heard about all these stations that were available, and then you would find out that many of them were just built for cars, and then you'd have the slow fill. It takes so long to fuel the equipment. And so we've learned through that. We've got to have a better infrastructure set up. And again, it gets you talked about it earlier, the expense of it. It's very expensive. So we've got to rely on incentives early on to get our feet wet in that, improve out the technology. Now, don't get me wrong. We can't make a long-term business plan based off of incentives. So incentives, got to get it jump started, but then we need to see that it is a viable piece of equipment for the long run. And I think we will. I think all the excitement going on in electric, I mean, good gosh, look at it from the auto side to the truck side. So we just got to get enough of it out there where we can all see that it works and get that cost down and get that weight and range issue and that infrastructure on the fueling, because it is real. The range anxiety is real. So we've got to get that infrastructure built.
One of the things that's interesting we see is in California and increasingly across the U.S., we have electric utilities are jumping in the game to provide incentives in addition to sort of the traditional government incentives. And in California, there's approaching $1 billion worth of incentives that are being made available from the electric utilities. And so hopefully that can help take care of the infrastructure side of this equation as you all design and build and deliver and operate the truck side. So we'll see how that goes. Ryan, I imagine as a major tier 1 supplier, you guys don't get super involved in the infrastructure side as the customer interface stuff, but I want to ask maybe a little bit about a different sort of piece of the infrastructure, and that's the workforce side. We're putting new technologies, new motors, batteries, all these sorts of things together and putting them out there into the hands of the customer. How does a company like Dana look at this from a workforce, maybe starting even internally with the workforce to build and deliver these products, but also making sure that as they get delivered and integrated into the OEM product and delivered to the customer, that we have the workforce ready for it so that the performance that's expected is realized and it works well. And how do you deal with workforce issues from your side?
Erik, you hit on a critically important piece. And I think, as Kary said, we need to take this technology needs to come to market with the whole ecosystem involved. And so the discussions that we have with customers, both OEs and with fleet customers, is if we're bringing a technology, it very quickly moves into how am I going to service it? How am I going to maintain it? I have all of my maintenance shops and mechanics, or even at the OE facilities. How do I get used to handling this technology coming in on my floor? What do I do when I get a truck down situation? So that's really been a critical area, and we're an area that we're really starting to focus in now. In training videos, we're actually putting up a whole training center at our world headquarters to work with both of our employees, our sales staff, and then bring in ultimately our customers and their customers and help to kind of build that service system, the service infrastructure in place on how to handle these systems. Because if we have a customer and like Craig said, he's got the eCascadia running, that truck goes down, and I'm sure it won't because it's a fantastic product. But if that truck were to go down on the side of the road, how is the mechanic going to handle it? If it's in an accident, how are they going to handle it when you have a 800-volt system sitting there and it's in an accident and you have a first responder in there on site? And what do they do? How do they know it's an electric vehicle? How do they know not to touch that wire that might now be exposed? So this is a huge issue. We've started to put out YouTube videos to put training modules out in place. So we're starting to do virtual training and starting to even use tools similar to this, and setting up a full training center at our world headquarters that's fully dedicated to doing exactly this type of work. I mean, I think TMC last year we were running non-stop training sessions throughout the day on how to handle EV safety, from a PPE to regular maintenance. What do you need to do on an ongoing basis on these type of vehicles? Because it's a complete mind shift. We have an industry out there that's used to working with diesel truck, and they know that stuff inside and out. But to get into this new technology, that's going to be a huge learning curve. And we can't just turn our back on it and expect that they'll figure it out once we sell them a product or a truck.
Craig or Kary, any thoughts on workforce? I'm sure you're looking at these issues thoroughly. Tell us a little bit about how you're handling them.
Well, on our workforce, obviously, with as far as the employees go, again, 20,000 out of the 30,000 are drivers. You've heard it for years. It is tough to attract and retain the drivers in this type of business. But we are encouraged because we're experiencing our lowest turnover ever in the history of the company. So that's good to see. And a lot of it is because the local and regional jobs that we now have. Also, as far as the workforce goes, with the expansion that we have going on with the 360 platform, we continue to have demand for highly skilled people working on our HOTEC side. So that continues to be a challenge, and we've been able to meet it, but it continues to be a challenge.
Yeah, so Erik, I'm going to put a bow on it because I think both Ryan and Craig would say competition for talent, right? So competition for talent is and will continue to be a concern across all aspects of our industry, from engineers to drivers to technicians and everywhere and anyone in between. So, we now find that, bright, engaged, dedicated employees on our teams, with our customers and their customers, they end up being a strategic advantage. And the competition for talent is just, it's fierce. We have to stay on top of it.
Thanks, Kary. I could think of no better way to wrap up a line of questioning by having an answer that's putting a bow on it. So I did promise the audience that we'd take some questions, and I know that they've been furiously firing them into the chat box here. So I'm going to just take a quick look and see what the team has highlighted for me here. Okay, what's been the most interesting trend that you've seen since the onset of COVID back around March? The most interesting trend. Any big trends? I mean, we've kind of touched on a bunch of this, but anything else that anyone wants to add there?
I'll take a shot at it. One of my favorite trends, and other people can probably do this, is look at the air pollution or the air quality difference you had during the quarantine period. There's not a lot of times in history where you'll be able to stop transportation like we did. But if you look at what happened in videos I've seen them from NASA, you've seen them from New Delhi. I think that the one data point I saw was a 60% reduction in particulate matter, year over year, just from that period of time. Look at the air quality differences that you see, that you won't probably see many times like this in our lifetime, that you can do a stop. That's the impact of zero emissions. That's the impact of people using sustainable technology. And that's the difference that we can make on this world if we're smart on how we move product. Moving product is going to be an important piece of our industry for our lifetime, for sure, and getting goods to where it needs to be. But how we do it is something that's in our control. That's the one trend that I see that just it's mind-blowing, and a reason that we double down on what we're doing in sustainable mobility.
It's great.
Erik,
Go ahead.
One trend we've all seen obviously is the work from home, and we've talked about that and about some increased productivity, and we saw that in certain areas. And one thing we are concerned about, though, is that what you lose from the work from home. And part of that is the collaboration of being around each other, seeing each other work. It's one thing to look at each other online like we're doing today, but it is a little concerning that we're going to lose some of that camaraderie and the sharing of information and ideas that when you're in a room and you can see each other's and body movement and we're a little concerned about that. So we welcome the day when we're able to get people back into the office on a more regular basis. And also we talked about this earlier about workforce. One thing that this has also opened up is that people are going to be able to compete with you more on the tech side when we have proven that there are certain jobs that people can do from home, and now they don't have to be geographically located next to you. So that's going to be interesting to see how that plays out.
That's interesting, Craig. I want to ask you, but I won't, about the drivers working from home on level 4 autonomous trucks, but we'll save that for a different session. Ryan, to your point, I know as a resident of Southern California, where we hold the leadership position for the worst air quality in the nation, I know that was really kind of an aha moment when the skies cleared up with everyone just bunkering at home. And everyone got that glimpse and said, yeah, this is what we're after. This is what we want. And it really kind of gave a shot in the arm, if you will, of these clean tech transportation, because that's really fundamentally where the air pollution here in Southern California and a lot of urban areas around the country comes from, is transportation. So, it was a kind of an early reminder on why we're doing all this stuff. So let me get back here to a couple of the other questions from the audience. Here's an interesting one we'll throw at you. Maybe again another little bit of a hot potato, but I'm interested in your answer. So the question is, besides your company, of course, who else do you all see as leaders in the field of advanced clean transportation? Who else is out there that you kind of look at and say, they're doing some good things? Anyone want to take a shot at that one? All right, Kary?
I'm going to go with more of an industry answer. I would say battery technology companies, right? I mean, I think Craig mentioned how quickly, or Ryan mentioned how quickly battery costs have come down, but I really think that our the scale will increase in adoption if we can get those battery costs down, performance up, reliability up. So I would say, leaders are definitely those battery technology companies that are really going to, make the difference in the future in this area of sustainable technology, especially battery electric vehicles.
Well, that was Roger's marching orders last year, right? Half the cost, half
The
the
future.
performance.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Anyone else on what you see out there in the landscape as far as who's doing good work in the field?
I think maybe I'd take another shot at again, kind of a different kind of industry take on this. Would be the energy producers, because that's going to be important as well. So if you look at all the use in the solar and the wind, in the hydro investment and things like that, because it's one thing if we if we can keep the pollution out of the cities in the transportation, but if it's still burning coal in the process to generate that electricity, it's not going to really make a big improvement for us. It's just going to move the location where that pollution is actually occurring. So I think that's one of the kind of important things when you kind of look well to wheel. And we're seeing a lot of improvement in that space, and that's going to be an important one moving forward as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. So I think we're just kind of getting up against the clock here, almost out of time. We'll maybe look at one last question. I'll take one from the audience and maybe modify it a little bit on something that I wanted to kind of ask about as a wrap up. So the audience question is, what up and coming technologies or projects should we be on the lookout for? And my version of that question is, what's the thing that you're most excited about in the future? What do you think is just really going to fundamentally change the industry or improve the industry going forward? So we I think started with Kary, went to Craig, and went to Ryan. So maybe we'll go in reverse order. And Ryan, we'll ask you to kick us off here. Tell us, what gets you and Dana most excited about the future of clean tech and commercial transportation?
I think the thing that gets me excited is I get excited by the idea of all of the investment that's going on at all different levels. And we talked about it a little bit as far as needing to understand the full marketplace, and you have to package the solution to go together. So I think the collaboration and partnerships that I see that are being established throughout the industry in all different areas, whether it be on components or vehicles or aftermarket and maintenance and the infrastructure, or even then going on past that and into how to maintaining and things like that. I think that's really the thing that makes me the most excited, is as this isn't just a niche technology, and I think people are starting to view this as this isn't a flash in the pan. This is coming. I think more and more people are partnering, more and more people are working together, and whether it be small startups that are popping up out of the woodwork to offer niche technologies and niche solutions to meet this need, or whether it's large industrials and people have been in this industry for years, like J.B. Hunt and like Daimler. I think that's really the thing that gets me excited about it. Is one, I think it means it's something that I see as really going to be happening here. And as we talked about before, I'm not sure exactly what even the winning technology is going to be. It could be fuel cells, it could be hybrid, it could be battery electric, it could be some combination of that. We don't know that yet. But I think the partnerships that I think you see and just the number of people involved in this on a day-to-day basis is really what gets me excited.
Great. Craig, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I just love seeing it come to fruition. It wasn't that many years ago. I say like 4 years ago, you would bring up alternative fuels and battery, and you would hear people say phrases like, "Not in my lifetime." And you don't hear that anymore. You see all the money going into it, the success that people are having with the batteries. Ryan touched on it about how the battery cost has come down so much, and we see the range continuing to expand. So it's really cool to see something come about before your eyes, because it was just talk for so long. But now you can't open up any publication, can go to any website or go to any internet site, not start seeing ads about electric vehicles on the auto side, and you see so much on the truck side, and then a lot of progress being made on the fuel cell side. So I'm just excited that we're going to be able to see this and come about in the next few years, that you see progress going on right before your eyes.
Great. Kary, you get the last word here.
Oh boy, it's going to be hard to top what Ryan and Craig said, but yeah, I mean, I think back, 10 years ago, a little over 10 years ago, sitting in a conference room, declaring that we wanted to have a 20% fuel efficiency improvement by 2020, right? I mean, that was 10 years ago, and here we are, we're at almost over 35% fuel efficiency that we brought to the market. And looking forward for our goals for a carbon neutral, vehicles, we have a goal of 2039 to have exclusive lineup, sell only exclusively carbon neutral vehicles. We're on that path. We know where we're going. We don't exactly know how we're going to get there, but I think what's exciting is that, the progress that we're making and how quickly all of this is coming to the market through partnerships with our customers, with our suppliers. So that's really has me excited for this. And it's a great time to be in the industry and watch it all come together.
Excellent. Wow, that's some great final comments. I think that really does a nice job of tying up this entire discussion. Thank you all for some great thoughts and input here. I heard innovation, investment, progress, collaboration, and partnerships is really the key. And ultimately, Kary, getting to a world that's carbon neutral is that's a pretty compelling and important goal. So thank you all for being here. Thank you all for what you do for the industry every day and working to make these products and technologies a reality and put them through the paces and test them and get us to that future. So great start here at ACT Virtual. Thank you all. Thanks to the audience for your questions and input and ideas here. And we'll look forward to seeing you at the next session. So have a good afternoon, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Erik.